Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, however you may be listening, whether it's your first time tuning in or you listen and watch every single day. Thank you for spending your time here with us. This is the Water Online Show, powered by Water Online, the leading online destination for the water and wastewater market. I am your host, Travis Kennedy, and joining me as usual is my co-host and chief editor here at Water Online, Mr. Kevin Westerling.
What's up, Travis?
Well, a lot's up, actually. So much so that I don't know if I can get my head around it. So maybe you can tell me what's going on, Kevin. Yeah, maybe. Our users and our listeners are hopeful that maybe somebody can. So
I could, but we'll leave that up to our guests.
If you could outline it. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
We'll leave it for the guests. But at the same time, if you feel like interjecting in any time in this introduction as to exactly what's happening and what's going to happen, I'm sure that we would appreciate it. So off that note, every day it seems that we're told that we should expect different things from this new administration here in the United States, what tariffs to expect and how the tariffs will impact various projects and things like operating costs and all things related to water and wastewater projects. My thought is that if somebody's telling you that they are right now 100% sure how this is going to impact every aspect of the industry, chances are they're probably lying. What I do think is that there are professionals out there that know more than most. They use data, facts, research, past history to give the best estimate or guess as to how this will impact the industry as a whole. Two of those industry thought leaders are nice enough to join us here today on the Water Online Show. And what we're going to dive into as our heads continue to spin at what seems to be a dizzying array of tariffs and federal budgets and executive orders. Many of us can't help but think not only is this a blitzkrieg of what I call unspecific specifics impacting the industry specifically, it's impacting how utilities can operate. Many of them are forced to play a game of freeze tag that I don't think any of them could have foreseen. So love it, hate it in terms of federal spending and tariffs for the water, wastewater market. We are in a blender, and that blender is set to high. So luckily, we here at Water Online, especially us here at Water Online, having Mr. Worldwide Chief Editor, you, Kevin Westerling, following all aspects of the story as they arise, and you can count on Water Online to bring you the most coverage as we go along the year. But first and foremost, today's episode of the Water Online Show is centered around how utilities can start to see some direction, as well as solutions providers. They can continue to operate at a highly efficient rate that they are used to while working, while also looking for answers themselves, as we all are. So here to help get us some answers is none other than Saurabh Singh and Jacob Steele of BlueTech Research. Gentlemen, welcome to the Water Online Show, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
So we're very early into the term of a new president here in the States, but there's already been what I noted in the introduction, a dizzying number of moves made by the administration that could impact the water industry specifically. So on a macro level, what do you anticipate the impact will be?
Yeah, thanks, Travis, for having us. I believe it will be mostly there will be a key tariff on the key water equipments like membrane pipes and valves, which will actually lead to the push-up cost, which will also slow down the big project, which are actually happening, or we're getting the traction in the California, the reuse project, and can also cause some of the supply chain issues. However, on the flip side, if government keep on investing in the local manufacturing, it can also create some of the opportunities for the local US providers. So companies will require to find new supplier in the US and also look for the more production back to the US.
You know, I noticed that you noted that in the graph that we're going to be referring to, and I'm going to put the graph up for our video watchers and those that are joining us over video, whether on Water Online or on YouTube, as to what the graph that I'm speaking about. It's entitled Possible Impacts of Tariffs in the U.S. Water Sector, which is really important for us as an industry to understand. And as we go through this discussion, what we're going to be talking about is categorically speaking, so whether it's pipes or treatment chemicals or smart water, whatever the case is, we're going to be talking about the tariff exposure level. So is the exposure level high or medium or low? And what that means is how it will affect the supply chain flexibility. So in what instances are we going to be able to pivot and utilize domestic resources to help to help fill that void that might have been created by the tariffs, but also talk about the key impact. And also the graph also does a great job at highlighting the strategic implication of it. So what, at a high level, what is going to happen? What could be affected, and how that real life events, how is that going to unfold? So for those of you watching us on the video feed, the graph is up. For those listening through the podcast and the audio feeds, you can
just imagine it.
Yeah, just imagine it. Draw a picture in your mind, or you can find it on Water Online, or BlueTech Research has that. So
yeah, and we're gonna go through every aspect of it individually, right? So Saurabh, like when you describe that, you described some short-term pain, I think, or uncertainty, maybe some long-term benefit. But if we're just like talking about the mindset of water and wastewater managers as it stands today, like heading into this, how should they adjust and Jacob, either one of you, please answer, their mindset, expectations, or the way they go about their business in these projects coming up?
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I think the first thing is really just to expect uncertainty. I think along with the tariffs, that's a constantly shifting environment. As of today, as of recording, the 25% tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico have been put into effect, plus an additional 10% tariffs on goods from China. There was already some existing tariffs there. And the Trump administration is also discussing further reciprocal tariffs on globally on basically all U.S. trading partners. So I think but between the time that this podcast is recorded and when it comes out, I'm sure that will have changed again. So I really think just being prepared for the uncertainty and staying on track, on top of the regulatory developments and the announcements on tariffs is really important. And then I think, the second thing would be procurement planning. So, to the greatest extent possible, looking to identify longer term supply contracts for things like valves, pipes, membranes, chemicals. That would be another potential thing, to the extent possible, that utilities could be doing to try and prepare and mitigate potential negative effects of the tariffs, at least in the short term.
And just to add in from the manager perspective, I think budget planning will be also one of the key criteria for managers, because now, because of uncertainty, they need to take a higher factor in before planning any budget.
So what you're saying is, if I understand it correctly, Saurabh, and correct me if I'm wrong, is as you go through the budgeting process, it would be a wise thing to do to integrate these tariffs into your budgeting so that you can be prepared for, I guess, what could be considered the worst case scenario, and that these tariffs will continue to exist at the rate they are moving forward for the foreseeable future. That would directly impact what you're able to spend and what you're able to buy. Do I have that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Well, I want to sort of shift gears and go on to specifics. I think that's a great sort of overarching theme, is be prepared for what we don't know is going to happen, but we can certainly prognosticate and plan for the worst case scenario. But in terms of, which I agree with completely, the specifics though. So BlueTech Research has examined the impact of the proposed tariffs could have on water sector commodities. And those commodities, you get pretty specific in naming what those categorical commodities might be. So let's look at some of those. So we're starting with pipes, pumps, and valves. And we're going to put the graph back up. How could these products and the projects that rely on them be affected for that category?
Yeah, so Travis, if you see pipes, valves, pumps, most of them are made up of steels and aluminum. And Trump government is about to put 25% tariff overall, not specifically for a specific country, but for overall world. And if that happens, which is expected to happen on 12th of March, then it will definitely increase the cost, the raw material cost for all these, which will eventually impact on the implementing in higher cost for any water related project. So that's one.
Yeah, and this can also definitely have impacts on municipal water projects and stormwater drainage projects, wastewater network expansions, as well could experience higher costs, as well as project delays in sourcing materials.
So basically everything.
Yeah.
Every
Pretty
aspect.
much.
Yeah, industrial, waste,
Well,
drinking,
yeah,
almost
pipes and
everything.
valves, pretty
Yeah,
important in the water
yeah.
industry. Um, so, all right, how about we talk about membranes, which are less overall used, I guess, but very important for certain applications like water reuse, desal. How will the cost of membranes be affected, and what will the effect be on water projects upcoming?
Traditionally, we have noticed that a lot of membrane suppliers are present in China. So the companies like Origin Water or Sinor, they are supplying UF membrane to USA. So due to that, I think with the tariff initially 10% and again 10% more on China, it will significantly impact the cost. And secondly, we were noticing that there was a rise in the water reuse project, especially in California, Florida area. I believe because of this higher cost or increase in the membrane, those project can get also impacted or can get delayed. Along with this, industrial water use was also getting some traction due to water stewardship goals. Probably because of this, it can also impact on those projects, and we can expect to see some lobbying also happening because of the higher cost in the membrane segment.
Jacob, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think when you say lobbying, Saurabh, do you mean lobbying for exemptions on the tariffs?
Yeah, it includes lobbying for exemption, but at the same time, some of the corporates like big Fortune 500, they have committed what to become water positive by 2030, by 2025, and follow on. So these kind of projects require a lot of water reuse project or investment in these ones. And in case the cost of membrane increases, there could be a lobbying effect impact inside the Fortune 500 companies, which can ask to either reduce this kind of stewardship goals or can, yeah, which can reduce the impact of this water stewardship goal.
Sure. Yeah.
So, membranes is somewhat unique in terms of its necessity within water treatment and how it relates to the market here in the United States as a whole. So one other piece of this that is specific to how it relates to here in the States and how we utilize it, the levels to which we utilize it is water treatment chemicals. So they are another part of the concern with these tariffs. But BlueTech's analysis suggests it's not as much as, say, membranes or pumps or some of the ones that we just covered. So what are the implications for coagulants, disinfectants, things like that?
Yeah, that's right, Travis. So again, there are a lot of these coagulants, flocculants, disinfectants do come from China, and there could be short-term shortages in specialized treatment chemicals, and that's for municipal and industrial. And of course, with the tariffs, we can see costs rise as well. But with chemical production, there is more domestic manufacturing, which can be more easily ramped up compared to, say, membrane production. And so that one we see as somewhat easier for municipalities and industrial water treatment companies to be able to source domestic chemicals for treatment.
What in terms of cost, though? So obviously, with the tariffs, the cost for those coagulants and chemicals would go up. And if there's domestic alternatives that could be tapped into and utilized, I would imagine those domestic alternatives will also be at a higher cost.
Yeah, absolutely true. I mean, as I said, I think that there's some sort of elasticity in terms of ability for the domestic manufacturers to increase their throughput. So I don't think it's quite a straight cost increase. The tariffs are applying 25% to China so the domestic manufacturers can increase their prices by 24%.
Right.
I don't think it's quite like that, but certainly fair point that we would expect higher prices, but maybe a little bit easier to find domestic sourcing there.
Makes sense. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, and I'm really hoping that none of these measures really halts like progress made towards sustainability goals. That the industrial sector in particular seem to be finally gravitating towards zero liquid discharge, for example, industrial reuse, like ESG related things. They really seem like they were gaining steam, but do you think there could be a slowdown on those efforts due to tariff exposure?
I think some of the companies which have already committed, like to become water positive by 2030 or so on, they will be keep on conducting their project. However, they will have to find some alternative suppliers or come up with different strategy. But as they have made the commitment and they are already receiving the headwinds, but I believe they will be keep on continuing with their commitment and moving forward.
It's good to hear.
Like to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's some positive. What say you, Jacob?
Yes, Rob. I'm curious. Who are some of the industrials who have committed to have made some of those commitments to becoming water positive by 2030? I know BlueTech's working with a few of them.
Yeah, for example, Microsoft, they have committed to become water positive by 2030. They have been completing and conducting a lot of water replenishment project all across the world, and more specifically in those basins where they have their data centers. So despite of these kind of tariff coming in, I believe Microsoft goals will stay intact and they will be keep on investing in those projects. Same goes with P&G, Nestle, Procter and Gamble, and so on.
I believe Coca-Cola had a similar goal. I'd have to double check the year, but I know they were working towards zero
No,
net
that's
positive water.
Kevin. Actually, they were the one of the company which made this goal in 2007 itself when
Wow.
Oh,
taps were quite new. They have completed probably the most number of water replenishment project across the world too.
Well, that's good to hear. And I also
shout out to Coke.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things that were just talked about in terms of sustainability is the momentum, right? There's a lot of momentum that's going into that effort, and it's a global effort. So while we're on the topic of momentum, there is a sector within water wastewater, especially here in the States. I think might be a little bit more advanced overseas in Europe, but that is IoT, water tech, digital water. So what kind of effects are we going to see on that sector specifically, as to hopefully you're going to tell me we're not going to lose much momentum? I'm hoping that you say that. I don't know if you will or not, but where do we stand in terms of not losing the momentum that we have going on currently?
Jacob, you want to take on first?
Yeah.
Jacob's smiling.
Yeah.
For those of you
Well,
listening, Jacob's smiling. So he's got this covered.
Sure, Travis. So smart meters, SCADA systems, and IoT sensors used in the US do typically or commonly rely on semiconductors and chips imported from China. So we can see, increased costs there, potentially delaying metering upgrades and water efficiency programs. We also, kind of an emerging area would be industrial players also starting to look a bit more at smart water and IoT sensors in the industrial space. And we could potentially see some loss of momentum there.
We keep running into the microchips from China. It seems like no matter what industry or what sector of the industry that we're talking about, we keep running into that wall. But thank you for pointing that out. It's a truth, and I agree. I hope we don't lose the momentum, and I hope that we are able to somehow sustain some level of moving forward here, which I think we will be able to. It's just going to take an adjustment period, and we're gonna see how that unfolds.
Yeah, absolutely, Travis. And of course, as we all know, there are huge investments in domestic semiconductor manufacturing capability, but those are very complicated projects to build and plants to get up and running. So it takes time.
So in summary, the cost of everything is going up. Or at least everything we talked about here, because we covered specific things that could be affected by tariffs. So, I mean, but these are necessities for getting the job done within water treatment, right? So we're going to have to purchase them nonetheless, and that could cause operational costs to go up, which could trickle down to ratepayers, which we don't want. So do you have any sort of advice to kind of keep costs in check even while we're paying more for this equipment?
What's the magic wand? Saurabh, Jacob, we need the magic wand here. How do you fix those? How do you reconcile those two things?
One advice will be, even though the cost for smart water metering leak detection technology will go higher, but if you are investing in these, they can help you to save cost in other segments, like with pipe, valves, and membrane. So I think this area will still get the same momentum, which we have seen in the past. And apart from that, as Jacob previously covered, I think diversifying your key suppliers will be key. Those countries which doesn't have yet these tariff, companies can look for some alternatives there. And the third could be also to look for long-term contract. One example is American Water utility. They created a 9-year contract with Calgon Carbon for their activated carbon supply. So these kind of contract can avoid utilities from these small or sudden tariff changes impact in the longer duration or long-term project. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say too, just to add to it, that we have a lot of really good solutions providers and manufacturers here in the United States. We do, that produce carbon, that produce chemicals, that produce pumps, that produce pipes. So one of the intended or unintended, however you want to view it, outcomes of this is that there's going to be more attention placed on those that are primarily domestic in terms of manufacturing. I know that there was the BABA.
Build America, Buy America.
Yeah, exactly. That's certainly going to help that movement and that effort. So again, maybe intended, maybe unintended, but it would certainly turn attention more so towards some of our solutions providers, of which we have a lot that are really good in terms of what they provide the marketplace. So what do you say about that, Jacob, in terms of purchasing these products and advice on savings for operational costs and reconciling trying to avoid rate hikes versus obviously spending more to treat the same water?
Absolutely. I think, there's of course no silver bullet. Likely many of these products and commodities will go up in price. And so I think, to your point, identifying opportunities for domestic sourcing where possible, longer term contracts, and like Saurabh mentioned, and as well investing in efficiency, like IoT and other digital solutions. Those are some of the ways that could potentially mitigate increases in operational costs. But I do think that there are utilities do have to plan for higher costs moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's going to be inevitable. Like you said, there is no magic bullet that's going to have those two truths sort of come together and be able to work out something that doesn't affect either one. So there's higher cost equals higher rates. That's historically how it's been done. So I agree. You can look at a number of different avenues that you can try and find to lessen the blow, so to speak, right? But in the end, a very real possibility is that the rates are going to go up for the end user on that. So I'm going to ask you to put your future-looking fortune teller hat on here. So we've had, as I mentioned again earlier, the dizzying array of executive orders and tariffs and rule changes and regulation changes and a lot of change. So what about any new regulations or changes to existing regulations? So do you anticipate any probably yes, but maybe no. But do you anticipate any? And if yes, who gets impacted?
Yeah, so we're closely tracking the PFAS space, and I know you've covered that area quite a bit on this show. But a couple areas, I guess, to highlight would be that the EPA had worked up some proposed or draft level regulations on regulating PFAS discharges in industrial wastewater. And those had not yet been released at the end of the last administration, and now those seem unlikely to be released under this administration. And so this was controlling PFAS, setting limits on PFAS in chemical manufacturing wastewater, as well as textiles and landfill leachate, and a couple other areas were under consideration as well. So I think it does have downstream effects on wastewater utilities. It can maybe make it more difficult in some cases for them to implement source controls, and that has downstream effects on there potentially being PFAS in their effluent and PFAS in the biosolids as well. The other kind of regulatory move, and this is of course not strict regulation, but the EPA had their draft risk assessment for PFAS in biosolids published recently, and that potentially sets the EPA on a road to regulating the PFAS content in biosolids to be land applied in the future. So that's another one for wastewater utilities that they have to be following. I think on the drinking water side, as we all know, the primary drinking water standards for PFAS, I would expect those are not going to be directly changed by the current administration itself. But we do know that there are ongoing legal challenges to those limits, which could see those limits being tossed back to the EPA for review, or otherwise potentially modified. So those are just a couple areas around PFAS that we're closely watching. Saurabh, any other kind of regulatory highlights that you wanted to mention?
Jacob, I think you have mostly covered the major ones, but in general, we are expecting that in the Trump administration, from the regulation side, it won't be that strictly driven like the way we were seeing the momentum in the Biden's government. We can see there will be more infrastructure spending and projects coming up, but from the regulation perspective, I think it will be lenient compared to the previous government.
So it's interesting.
Yeah, and sorry, if I may, I just want to add the point that obviously utilities are also regulated at the state and local level, and so those regulations, particularly in bluer or more progressive states, those regulations are not going anywhere, and so really what we're seeing is the more fragmented regulatory landscape overall, with state and local level regulations really driving things on PFAS, for example.
So that's what we needed more in the U.S. is more fragmentation, and but you're right. So it's good to hear that, like in terms of perhaps EPA regulations, how they might have to revisit some of them. That there's at least more than a possibility that some of them, unspecifically, could be rolled back a little bit. But on the other side of things, infrastructure should continue to see the momentum that it's had. There's going to be a lot of projects coming up that hopefully don't lose any kind of status as to where they are, and they can continue to go into completion. So there's a lot going on. I think when you were presented with a question of tell us what's going to happen, predict the future for us, you did probably a better job than anybody could have done in giving us at least an idea as to what we could be expecting to see. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Travis.
Yeah, we covered a lot today. Thank you both, guys. Just to close, I think, is there any overarching advice you might give? Because, I mean, we're talking about a lot of uncertainty here. And we touched on some economic impacts too, but, that could swirl as well. So, I mean, most of these kind of like measures that are being put in place by the administration are to drive economic growth. If they do, we'll see. But everything's uncertain. So, do you have any advice for, municipalities, industries, just trying to navigate water policy in the next 4 years, let's say?
Yeah, sure, Kevin. So as you mentioned that at the end of the day, uncertainty is the part of the game. But those who are staying informed or planning ahead or embracing the innovation will be best positioned to succeed. And I believe I will suggest all these utilities and the technology providers to follow these 3 steps.
What about you, Jacob? What parting
Yeah,
words do you have?
absolutely agree with what Saurabh said, and just not that utilities are not already doing this, but engaging in industry advocacy, and working through groups like AWWA, state drinking water associations, and the like, to highlight to state and federal lawmakers on the effects of potential effects on these regulations, and how cost increases can ultimately be passed on to consumers, to ratepayers. So I think, yeah, just highlighting, not that utilities aren't already doing this, but working through their advocacy organizations to highlight potential negative effects of some of these tariffs, and other measures, I think is something else that utilities can do.
I learned in the past half hour that we've been talking, I've learned a lot about not just the tariffs and the regulations, but how it's going to affect us moving forward. I am so impressed with the breadth of knowledge that BlueTech Research has, and both of you, and I applaud you and thank you for coming on the Water Online show and educating not just our listeners and our viewers, but also Kevin and I. Little probably educating me more than Kevin. Kevin's usually has his fingers on the pulse of these things, but I certainly learned a lot in the past half hour. So if anybody's looking for how do you go on to a podcast and absolutely kill it and have it be one of the most productive half hours that we've had here on the Water Online show, that's how you do it. So Saurabh, Jacob, thank you very much for joining us here today. And if any of our listeners and viewers want to get in touch with Jacob or Saurabh, or even BlueTech Research as a whole, we certainly would encourage you to do so. I'm sure you could find more information on their website, as well as reach out to them perhaps directly. They are a knowledge expert when it comes to the water wastewater market. So feel free to check them out. Saurabh, Jacob, thanks for coming on the Water Online show today. We appreciate it. And I say this with 100% earnest, meaning I cannot wait to have you back. It's going to be a kind of a crazy year, and we may need to bring you in tomorrow or 3 months from now or 6 months from now, because we don't know, but we loved having you on the show. Thanks for joining us. And for all of you out there, our viewers, our listeners, thank you for spending your time here with us today on the Water Online show, and we will see you next time.